Where is the fine line beyond which civilized man ceases to be the master of nature and becomes its victim? At the end of the 16th century, Roanoke Island became the scene of one of the darkest and most confusing dramas in the history of the colonization of new lands. 107 people, armed with knowledge, tools, and hope, simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only silence and a single word carved into a tree. This is not just a story of disappearance. It is a chronicle of a desperate struggle with the unknown, where every day was a battle for the right to breathe. There were no loud battles or great victories here, only monotonous, exhausting labor and fear permeating every inch of the damp earth. We are used to thinking of colonization as a heroic march, but the reality was much more prosaic and terrifying. This is a story about how the forest and the ocean swallow up traces of human presence, leaving not even graves behind. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one fatal navigational error and a series of climatic anomalies turned a fortified fort into the setting for nature's perfect crime. What if I told you that the fate of the expedition was sealed not at the moment of their disappearance, but the second their feet touched the sand? Their arrival on Roanoke Island was not a triumphant entry of victors, but more like an emergency landing in enemy territory. The ships that were supposed to be their bridge to civilization had left, leaving the colonists alone with the wild continent. The first days were filled not with the joy of discovery, but with a frantic attempt to create the illusion of safety. People began to erect fortifications, trying to fence themselves off from the endless forest, which seemed like a living and hostile creature. Every log driven into the ground was an attempt to assert their right to be there. But the land resisted. Sand clogged their tools, humidity ruined their supplies, and unfamiliar insects turned their nights into torture. Construction progressed slowly, exhausting people physically and mentally, causing them to doubt the wisdom of the whole endeavor. The island, which seemed like paradise from the sea, turned out to be a complex ecosystem with limited resources upon closer inspection. Fresh water was scarce, and the sources that were found often turned out to be brackish or polluted. Hunting required skills that not all of the city dwellers who had arrived with the group possessed. Fishing, which seemed like an obvious solution, became dangerous due to unpredictable currents and storms that suddenly swept in from the ocean. The psychological pressure grew with each passing day as the horizon remained empty and there was no help in sight. People began to realize that they were locked in a golden cage, where the beauty of the landscape hid a deadly threat. Every rustle in the bushes beyond the camp perimeter was perceived as a signal to attack.
I heard something out there.
Even though the enemy was often not even visible, it was a slow descent
us.
into paranoia, fueled by isolation and uncertainty. The expedition leaders tried to maintain discipline, but their authority melted away along with the food supplies. Decisions were made in haste, often based on emotions, which led to mistakes in the distribution of resources. The hope that the land itself would feed them was shattered by the harsh reality of sandy soils unsuitable for conventional agriculture. They had to learn everything anew, breaking their habits and ideas about life. Instead of building cities, they built shelters, trying simply to survive the next night. Tools became blunt, clothes wore out, and there was nothing to replace them with. It was not expansion, but survival at the limits of human capabilities, where every nail was worth its weight in gold. They brought with them the dream of a new life, but were faced with the need to fight to prolong the old one. The island's isolation played a cruel joke. It was close enough to the mainland to see it, but far enough away to be cut off from resources. The currents around Roanoke were treacherous, creating a natural prison for those without reliable ships. The very geography of the place worked against the settlers, making logistics an impossible task. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. Which do you think is scarier? An unknown threat from the forest or the realization of complete isolation from the outside world?
I am alone in this wilderness.
Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of the story.
This is all that remains of the corn.
Are you ready to learn the truth about why the food lists of that era read like a death sentence? When the euphoria of arrival subsided, the dry and ruthless arithmetic of survival came to the fore. The supplies brought from England were calculated for a specific period, but no one took into account the spoilage of food in the holds during the long voyage. Opening barrels of salted meat and sacks of flour, the colonists increasingly found mold and rot instead of salvation. John White and his assistants were forced to introduce the harshest rationing, which affected everyone, regardless of status. The daily ration was reduced literally by grams, turning meals from a means of restoring strength into a ritual of dividing crumbs. People began to view each other not as neighbors, but as competitors for an extra piece of bread. Hunger changed psychology, exacerbated old grudges, and created new conflicts out of thin air. Attempts to establish agriculture were hampered by climatic realities for which Europeans were unprepared. Seeds brought from foggy Albion burned under the scorching sun or rotted in overly moist soil. The few seedlings that did manage to sprout were weak and could not feed 100 people. Farming turned into a game of chance, where the stakes were life itself and the odds of winning were close to zero.
The corn is gone and the soil is dead. What are we supposed to do now?
Hunting also did not bring the expected results, as game on the small island was quickly scared away or exterminated. Large animals moved deeper into the mainland, where access was difficult due to the lack of boats and fear of the unknown. Fishing remained the only stable source of protein, but it too depended on the weather and the season. Storms could cut people off from the sea for weeks, condemning them to starvation. Water became another problem. Wells dug in a hurry often dried up or filled with sand. It took enormous effort to find new sources and clean old ones, which was a feat in conditions of malnutrition. Dehydration, combined with heat and hard labor, wore people down faster than any disease. The human body began to wear itself out, burning through its internal reserves at an alarming rate. In these conditions, the fragility of civilized people deprived of their familiar infrastructure became apparent. Craftsmen whose skills were valued in cities found themselves helpless in the face of hunger. The ability to sew velvet doublets or engrave metal did not help to fill the stomach. The hierarchy of values was turned upside down. Those who knew how to find edible roots or catch crabs became more important than scientists.
It's almost empty.
Storage rooms, which were supposed to be a guarantee of security, became a place of constant anxiety and checks.
You were the last one here. This sack is empty.
Every missing biscuit led to an investigation and suspicion, destroying trust within the community. People began to hide food and create secret stashes, which only reinforced the atmosphere of disunity. Do you think modern society could survive in a situation where food ceases to be a commodity and becomes the only currency? What I am about to show you is banned from history textbooks as too ambiguous. The relationship between the colonists and the local tribes did not fit into the black and white scheme of invader and victim or savage and enlightener. It was a complex web of half-truths, broken promises, trade alliances, and sudden outbreaks of violence. The CROATOAN and CROATOAN tribes were not just background characters. They were full-fledged political players in the region. The colonists arrived in a land where a balance of power already existed, and their arrival disrupted it without them even realizing it. They tried to apply European norms of diplomacy, where completely different laws of hospitality and war prevailed. Gifts that the English considered generous could be perceived as an insult, and a gesture of goodwill as a sign of weakness. The language barrier exacerbated the situation, turning negotiations into a pantomime with unpredictable results. Initial contacts were cautious, marked by mutual curiosity and hidden threats. The locals saw the newcomers as a source of amazing things, metal and fabrics, but also as a source of danger. The English, on the other hand, saw the Indians as the key to survival, as guides in this alien world, but feared their numbers and knowledge of the terrain. This fear forced the colonists to keep their fingers on the triggers even during peaceful meetings. One of the fatal mistakes was a misunderstanding of the complex system of alliances and enmities between the tribes themselves. In trying to befriend some, the colonists automatically became enemies to others without realizing it. They found themselves drawn into intertribal conflicts they did not understand and became pawns in someone else's game. Local chiefs quickly realized how to use the newcomers with their thunder sticks to their advantage. Trade, which was brisk at first, soon began to falter due to the depletion of supplies on both sides. The Indians could not feed 100 people indefinitely without jeopardizing their own winter supplies. The colonists' demands became more and more insistent, turning from requests to veiled threats. This caused natural rejection and a desire to get rid of the freeloaders who gave nothing in return. The incident with the missing silver cup, which led to the burning of an entire village by the first expedition, cast a long shadow over relations. The memory of past aggression by white people was alive, and the new settlers were paying for the actions of their predecessors. Trust was undermined from the very beginning, and it was almost impossible to restore it. Nevertheless, there were moments of remarkable cooperation and cultural exchange that could have changed history. Some colonists tried to learn the language and adopt fishing and boat-building techniques. It was these connections, subtle and informal, that could have become the bridge that led some people to the CROATOAN tribe. If you like this kind of in-depth analysis of historical details, please like this video. It will help us make more quality content. Guess how long it took John White to realize that he had to leave his family behind in order to save them? This decision became one of the most dramatic moments in the entire history of the Roanoke colony, a point of no return. The governor, who was supposed to be a symbol of stability and authority, was forced to become a supplicant and a courier. The colonists, realizing the criticality of their situation, literally forced him to board a ship and sail to England for supplies. White's departure was not an escape, but an act of desperation, a last gamble in a game with death. Standing on the deck of the departing ship, he saw the receding figures on the shore, his daughter, granddaughter, friends, and comrades. He promised to return in a few months before the winter storm set in, not knowing that fate would decide otherwise. Those who remained on shore watched the sails with eyes full of hope and dread of the loneliness to come. The ocean that separated the colony from the mother country became an insurmountable wall that year due to political turmoil. War with Spain was raging in Europe, and every ship was mobilized to defend England from the Spanish Armada. White's pleas for help were drowned out by the roar of cannons and the bureaucratic red tape of wartime. No one wanted to risk ships for a handful of people on the other side of the world when the very existence of the kingdom was at stake. For those left on the island, time flowed very differently, turning into a viscous substance of waiting. Weeks turned into months, months into years, and the horizon remained empty and indifferent. Every morning began with a glance at the sea, and every evening brought bitter disappointment. The feeling of abandonment gnawed at their souls more than hunger gnawed at their bodies. They began to understand that they had become a written-off asset, a forgotten chapter in the book of imperial ambitions. This realization required a complete restructuring of their consciousness. Now they could only count on themselves. Illusions of imminent rescue were crumbling, forcing them to make tough, pragmatic decisions about the future. Inevitable processes of social transformation began within the colony as old leaders lost influence without outside support. New authorities emerged, those who offered real plans of action rather than empty promises. It was perhaps during this period that key decisions about the fate of the settlement were made.
We die.
In the next chapter, you will learn how nature dealt the colonists a blow from which they could not recover. Studies of tree rings conducted centuries later revealed the terrible secret of that period. The years 1587, 1589 were not just hot, they were the most severe drought in the region in the last 800 years. The colonists arrived at the worst possible time Caught in a climatic anomaly of incredible force, the land, already stingy with its harvest, turned to stone, rejecting any grain. Rivers dried up, turning into thin streams or stagnant puddles, breeding grounds for disease and insects. Fresh water became a scarce commodity for which people would kill, and its quality was rapidly declining. The forest, which had previously been a source of life, became dry and prone to fire, threatening to destroy the settlement at any moment. Animals migrated in search of moisture, leaving hunting grounds empty. Attempts to grow anything in the gardens were doomed. The sprouts withered before they could gain strength. People spent precious water on irrigation, but the sun evaporated the moisture faster than it reached the roots. It was a Sisyphean task, draining the last of the exhausted people's strength. Hopes for an autumn harvest to feed them through the winter crumbled to dust. Local tribes, who themselves suffered from starvation, could no longer share even the smallest crumbs. The drought exacerbated competition for resources to the limit, making any alliances impossible. The Indians defended their water sources and hunting grounds with redoubled fury. Nature had leveled the playing field, bringing both those who had lived here for centuries and those who had just arrived to the brink of survival. Inside the settlement, the atmosphere heated up along with the air temperature. Heat stroke and dehydration became commonplace, and people were visibly weakening. The lack of vitamins and fresh food led to outbreaks of diseases that their bodies could not fight off. Every day was a struggle against the relentless sun, which rose over the island like an executioner. The trees lost their leaves prematurely, creating a surreal landscape of a dying world. The birds stopped singing, and an ominous silence hung over the island, broken only by the dry crackling of branches. It was a slow suffocation of an entire ecosystem, witnessed and suffered by the settlers. They tried to dig deeper wells, but their tools broke on the hard ground. They tried boiling seawater, but they did not have the technology for effective desalination. Their ingenuity was hampered by the physical limitations of matter and the lack of materials. Are you ready for the shocking truth that CROATOAN is not a riddle, but a clear instruction? When John White left the colony, a system of signs was developed for emergency evacuation. The agreement was simple and logical, as are all the actions of experienced military personnel and travelers. If the colonists decided to leave voluntarily, they were to carve the name of their destination in a prominent place. If the departure was forced under pressure from attack or disaster, a Maltese cross had to be carved above the name. It was a kind of SOS signal, understandable without words. When White returned and saw the word CROATOAN, the first thing he looked for was the cross, and there was no cross. This meant that the departure was planned, organized, and probably calm. People did not flee in panic, leaving their belongings behind and overturning tables. They methodically gathered, packed everything they could carry, and left for their allies. The absence of traces of struggle, bodies, or burned buildings confirmed this theory. The sign was carved into a palisade post at eye level in clear, deep letters. It was a message left not in haste, but with the intention of being read. The person who held the knife did not tremble with fear. He was following protocol. A second unfinished word, CRO, was found on another tree, which may indicate that they wanted to leave several markers. CROATOAN Island, now Hatteras, was located south of Roanoke and was home to a friendly tribe led by Manteo. Manteo was baptized and even visited England. He was a link between two worlds. It is logical to assume that in the face of deadly drought and famine, the colonists decided to join forces with those who knew how to survive. The dismantling of the houses also indicated that their actions were planned. They did not simply leave. They probably tried to take valuable materials with them or hide what they could not carry. This is the behavior of people who are moving, not victims who are fleeing. However, if the message was so clear, why didn't White go after them immediately? A storm, the loss of an anchor, and a mutiny by the crew prevented him from reaching CROATOAN. Fate intervened again, turning a clear sign into an eternal mystery. He was so close to solving it, but the elements threw him back into the ocean. The word CROATOAN became a symbol of mystery only because no one was able to verify its meaning in the heat of the moment. For the colonists themselves, it was simply an address left on the door for the returning owner. We have moved to the neighbors. That is what it meant in the language of survival. Why do you think, despite such a clear sign, historians have spent centuries searching for complex explanations instead of believing what was written? In the next chapter, we will examine exactly how this unprecedented migration took place. Imagine the logistics of moving an entire settlement in the complete absence of transportation and roads. It was an operation that required incredible organization and discipline from exhausted people. They had to decide what to take with them and what to leave behind, and every choice was agonizing. Tools, weapons, seeds, warm clothing, all of these took priority over personal belongings and memories of the past. Heavy items that could not be carried had to be hidden. Chests with books, maps, and excess equipment were buried in the ground in the hope of returning for them later. These were time capsules that they left as a pledge of their return, as an anchor holding them to this place. The packing process itself probably took several days. The women sewed backpacks from scraps of fabric, while the men prepared weapons and distributed the load. Children who could walk also carried their share. The elderly and sick were helped by building stretchers or simply supporting them under the arms. It was a caravan of shadows moving through the forest toward a ghostly hope. The journey to CROATOAN Island, though not far on the map, was in reality an extremely difficult one. They had to cross straits, swamps, and dense thickets. Without boats, which they had critically few or none of, the crossing became a deadly task. Perhaps they used rafts or the help of Native Americans with their canoes. Each step took them further away from the idea of an English colony and closer to a new identity. By taking off their European clothes, which were uncomfortable in the forest, and putting on moccasins, they changed not only outwardly, they accepted the rules of this continent, dissolving into its landscape. The abandoned fort, deprived of life, immediately began to die. Without maintenance, the roofs leaked, the palisade rotted, and nature began to reclaim its space. It was a sad sight, an empty shell of ambition, abandoned by its creators. The silence that reigned after their departure was heavier than the noise of any battle. During the transition, discipline had to be ironclad. Any delay or mistake could cost the entire group their lives. They walked quietly, trying not to attract the attention of hostile tribes, moving as one organism. The leaders who took responsibility for this outcome showed true managerial heroism. When John White finally set foot on the shore of Roanoke in 1590, 3 years later, he was met with deafening silence. There were no shouts of welcome, no smoke from hearths, no barking dogs. Only the sound of the wind in the treetops and the lapping of waves on the shore. It was every father and commander's worst nightmare come true. He and his sailors walked toward the fort with their weapons at the ready, expecting an ambush. But there was no enemy. They blew their horns and sang familiar English songs, hoping someone would respond. But the forest swallowed the sounds, returning not even an echo. It was like entering a haunted house where life had stopped suddenly and long ago. The fort was not just empty, it had been dismantled. The houses had been taken apart and the stockade rebuilt, suggesting that the place had not been captured, but deliberately abandoned. This observation gave White a glimmer of hope, but at the same time raised new questions. Where were they? And why hadn't they left more detailed letters? The discovery of the buried chests was a blow to White. They had been dug up and looted, probably by local residents after the colonists had left. White's books, maps, and drawings were scattered on the ground, ruined by rain and sun. It was painful to see his life's work and the memory of civilization trampled in the mud, but it meant that there had been no large-scale battle here. The absence of bodies was the main factor. Not a single bone, not a single skull, not a single fresh or old burial. This contradicted the scenario of a massacre or epidemic. Death always leaves traces, but here there was the sterile cleanliness of disappearance. White saw the word CROATOAN and felt relief mixed with anxiety. He knew where to go. He knew what to do. The plan was clear: weigh anchor and head for Hatteras. But the sea had its own plans. A storm began, one of those that break masts and destinies. The ships lost their anchors and were forced to head out to sea to avoid crashing into the rocks. White begged the captain to turn back, but he refused to risk the ship and crew for a faint hope. The expedition turned back to England, leaving the colonists one step away from salvation. What happened to the people who went into the forest? Logic and facts indicate that they did not perish in a single day, but dissolved into the local tribes. In order to survive, they had to give up their identity. European clothing wore out and was replaced by animal skins. The English language was forgotten, giving way to Algonquin dialects. They learned to build houses out of bark instead of boards. They learned to read animal tracks instead of letters in the Bible. The women probably married Indian warriors, and the men took local women as wives. It was the only way to ensure safety and a future for their children. Genetic fusion was inevitable. The light eyes and hair sometimes found among the Indians of this region in later centuries may have been an echo of that very blood. Legends of the CROATOAN, later Lambi tribe, speak of ancestors who spoke from books. But what was the price of this assimilation? It meant a complete loss of connection with the past. They ceased to be English, Christians in the usual sense, subjects of the Queen. They became part of another world, accepting its gods and laws. Perhaps the elders continued to tell their children tales of big cities across the sea, of stone houses and ships. But for the new generation, these were just myths, unrelated to the reality of hunting and gathering. Were they happy, or did they live with a constant longing for home, looking eastward? We will never know their inner feelings, but we do know that they chose life, albeit in a different form. Assimilation is not death, but rebirth. The Roanoke colony did not disappear. It simply shed its skin like a snake. They became invisible to history because history looks for Europeans and finds Indians. The story of Roanoke has left us with more questions than answers, and that is its main appeal. It reminds us that there are more blank spots on the map of history than filled-in areas. It is a lesson in humility before time, which erases civilizations like a wave erases a drawing in the sand. Archaeologists still find small artifacts, a ring with a coat of arms, a piece of slate, shards of pottery. These silent witnesses are the only thing that connects us to those people. Each such object is a tiny window into the past that immediately slams shut. Roanoke has become a cultural myth, a scary story told at night. But behind the mystique lies the real drama of living people faced with an impossible choice. It is a story of love, fear, hunger, and courage. Modern science, using DNA analysis and satellite imagery, is trying to shed light on this mystery. But perhaps some secrets should not be fully revealed. Uncertainty makes us remember them better than any dry facts. We have learned to conquer space and split the atom, but we cannot find traces of 100 people who disappeared 4 centuries ago. This is the irony of progress. The legacy of Roanoke is a reminder of the fragility of our existence. We build walls, but they crumble. We write books, but they rot. All that remains is life, which finds its way by changing forms and appearances. We have come a long way from the hope of the early days to the silence of the abandoned fort. The story of Roanoke is not a detective story with a twist at the end, but a philosophical parable about man's encounter with eternity. They defeated the storm by crossing the ocean, but lost to time and distance. Their choice to disappear into the unknown was an act of supreme courage. Do you think you could make such a decision? To give up your past forever, to give the future a chance? Write in the comments what other historical mysteries haunt you, and we will definitely explore them in future episodes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because history is full of secrets waiting to be told.